Imagine a tree so powerful that it doesn't need fertilizer because it makes its own. A tree that fed Roman legions, rebuilt the bombed-out wastelands of post-war Europe, and turned dust bowls back into productive farmland. For nearly 2,000 years, it was considered one of the most valuable species a farmer could plant. Then something changed. As the chemical fertilizer industry exploded in the mid-20th century, this tree began appearing on invasive species lists. One mature tree can outperform commercial fertilizer year after year, reproducing itself, spreading without permission, and giving farmers independence. This is the story of Black Locust, Robinia pseudoacacia, the nitrogen tree they don't want you to plant. Welcome to Ancestral Yields. If you believe the best crops are the ones that don't need corporate inputs, hit that like button and subscribe. We're digging up the past to fertilize the future. To understand why Black Locust became a threat, you first need to understand what it is. Black Locust is not just another tree. It is a biological nitrogen factory. Most plants require nitrogen from the soil to grow. Nitrogen is the primary nutrient in all commercial fertilizers. It is what makes crops green, drives growth, and determines yield. Without it, plants starve. Farmers have two options: buy synthetic nitrogen fertilizer produced using the Haber-Bosch process that consumes roughly 2% of the world's total energy supply, or plant legumes, plants that have evolved a symbiotic relationship with soil bacteria that pull nitrogen directly from the atmosphere. Black locust is a legume, but it is not a bean that lives for one season. It is a tree that can live for 100 years. And every single day of those 100 years, it is pulling nitrogen out of thin air and pumping it into the ground. Here is how it works. Black locust roots form nodules that house bacteria called rhizobium. These bacteria take nitrogen gas from the air, which plants cannot use, and convert it through nitrogen fixation into ammonia, which plants can absorb. The tree provides the bacteria with sugars from photosynthesis. The bacteria provide the tree with nitrogen. It is a partnership that has existed for millions of years, long before humans invented the fertilizer bag. The numbers are staggering. A mature black locust tree can fix between 75 and 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year. For context, a typical corn crop requires about 150 to 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre. That means a well-established stand of black locust can generate enough nitrogen to grow a full corn crop without ever buying a bag of fertilizer. But it gets better. Black locust does not hoard that nitrogen. When the leaves fall in autumn, they decompose rapidly. Black locust leaves have a carbon to nitrogen ratio of about 15 to 1 up to 20 to 1, which is ideal for decomposition. Oak leaves have a ratio of 40 to 1 and take years to break down. Black locust leaves turn into rich humus within months, releasing that fixed nitrogen directly into the topsoil. The tree itself is one of the densest hardwoods in North America, with a specific gravity of 0.70, meaning it is heavier than water. This density translates to durability. Black locust wood is naturally resistant to rot and insect damage. It contains compounds called robinetin and dihydrorobinitin, which are toxic to fungi and wood-boring insects. This produces the most rot-resistant timber in the temperate world. When black locust was introduced to Europe in the 1600s, it found immediate acceptance. The genus name Robinia comes from Jean Robin and his son Vespasien Robin, French botanists who cultivated the tree in Paris. Within decades, it had spread across France, Germany, and Hungary. Farmers planted it in alley cropping systems between crop fields, The trees would fix nitrogen, the leaves would fertilize the crops, and the wood could be harvested for fence posts and construction. It was a closed-loop system that required zero external inputs. But the true value of Black Locust was revealed during the World Wars. After World War I and World War II, vast stretches of European farmland were destroyed. Soil was compacted by tanks, contaminated by chemicals, and stripped of nutrients. Conventional crops wouldn't grow. The land was dead. Black locust became the reclamation species. It was planted across France, Germany, Poland, and Hungary, specifically to restore nitrogen to bombed-out soil. Within a few years, the trees had stabilized the land and created conditions where other plants could return. By the 1950s, black locust plantations covered millions of acres in Europe. Farmers coppiced the trees, cutting them back every 7 to 10 years, and the stumps would resprout, continuing the nitrogen cycle indefinitely. This was a system that required no chemical inputs, no purchased fertilizer, and no dependency on external corporations. And that independence is exactly what made it a problem in the United States. In the early 20th century, the USDA was actively promoting black locust. Publications from the 1910s and 1920s described it as one of the most valuable trees for reforestation and soil improvement. Agricultural experiment stations planted black locust in test plots. Extension agents recommended it to farmers. Nurseries sold seedlings by the thousands. Then, in the 1930s, something shifted. The Haber-Bosch process, invented in 1909, had allowed for the industrial production of ammonia. Initially used for explosives during World War I, after the war, the same factories started making fertilizer. By the 1930s, chemical fertilizer companies were expanding rapidly. Agricultural research increasingly focused on maximizing yields through chemical inputs rather than biological systems. The timing is unmistakable. Just as the fertilizer industry was consolidating power, the tree that made fertilizer obsolete began disappearing from government recommendations. USDA stations began removing black locust from their experimental plantings. Publications that once praised the tree started describing it as weedy or aggressive. By the 1940s, black locust had been reclassified from a valuable agroforestry species to a plant of concern. Let's talk about the economics. The global nitrogen fertilizer market is worth over $70 billion annually. A single 50-pound bag of urea fertilizer costs between $20 and $40. A farmer growing 100 acres of corn might spend $15,000 to $20,000 per year on nitrogen alone. Now consider a farmer who plants black locust in hedgerows or alley crops. That farmer's nitrogen cost drops to zero. The trees do the work. The leaves fall and decompose. The soil improves year after year. There is no annual purchase, no dependency, no profit margin for the fertilizer company. One mature black locust tree, fixing 150 pounds of nitrogen per year, generates the equivalent of 3 to 4 bags of commercial fertilizer. At current prices, that's $60 to $160 worth of nitrogen annually from a single tree. A single acre planted at 200 trees per acre could theoretically replace $12,000 to $32,000 worth of fertilizer per year, and the trees keep doing it for decades. This is not agricultural science. This is agricultural economics. A tree that generates nitrogen for free is not a solution to the fertilizer industry. It is a competitor, and competitors must be managed or eliminated. The strategy was subtle. Black locust wasn't banned outright. It was reclassified. The USDA and state departments began describing it as invasive. Extension publications warned that it spreads aggressively and forms thickets. Nurseries stopped promoting it. Forestry programs stopped planting it. By the 1980s, Black Locust had been added to invasive species lists in multiple states. Today, 23 states have some form of restriction. California lists it on their invasive plant registry. Oregon and Washington classify it as a noxious weed in certain counties. The justification is ecological. It spreads via root suckers and can outcompete native vegetation. But let's examine that claim. Black locust is native to the Appalachian Mountains. In that native range, it grows alongside native oaks and pines without causing ecological collapse. It is a pioneer species that colonizes disturbed areas, stabilizes soil, and eventually gives way to later successional species. This is its ecological function. Outside its native range, black locust does spread. It suckers from the roots, especially when cut or damaged. But the same behavior is exhibited by native species like aspen, sumac, and box elder. None of these face the same level of restriction. The inconsistency is revealing. Black locust is banned in California while eucalyptus, which spreads aggressively and creates catastrophic wildfire fuel, remains legal. Bradford pears, genuinely invasive across the Southeast, are still sold at every garden center. The difference? These plants don't threaten a $70 billion industry. Despite the institutional hostility, black locust still fixes nitrogen, still builds soil, and still produces rot-resistant wood. For small-scale farmers and homesteaders, it remains one of the most valuable trees on the planet. In silvopasture systems, black locust is exceptional. Cattle and sheep graze beneath the trees. The trees provide shade and improve forage quality by fixing nitrogen into the soil. USDA research from the 1980s showed that forage production under black locust increased by 20% to 40% compared to open pasture. The trees can be coppiced every 7 to 10 years. The stumps resprout vigorously, and the harvested wood becomes fence posts or firewood. A well-managed coppice system can produce 3 to 5 tons of dry wood per acre per cycle while continuing to fix nitrogen. In alley cropping, black locust is planted in rows with crops grown between. The trees are pruned to allow sunlight, and the nitrogen-rich leaves fall into the crop rows. Research from the 1990s showed that corn and wheat yields in black locust systems matched or exceeded conventional fertilized monocultures with zero fertilizer cost. Black locust grows on poor soils, compacted soils, and eroded slopes. It tolerates drought once established and a wide pH range from 4.5 to 8.0. It grows in USDA hardiness zones 4 through 9, covering most of the continental United States. The flowers are another overlooked resource. In late spring, the trees produce massive clusters of white, fragrant blossoms. These flowers are edible, with a sweet, slightly floral flavor. They can be eaten raw, battered, and fried into fritters, or made into syrup. In Romania and Hungary, black locust flower fritters are a traditional delicacy. The flowers are also a major nectar source for honeybees. Black locust honey is considered one of the finest honeys in the world, light, clear, and slow to crystallize. In Hungary, acacia honey, which is actually black locust honey, is a prized export. A single mature tree can produce enough nectar to yield several pounds of honey. The wood quality deserves attention. Black locust has a Janka hardness rating of 1,700 pounds force, harder than white oak at 1,360. For firewood, It produces approximately 27.3 million BTUs per cord, compared to 24 million for oak. For fence posts, Black Locust is unmatched. Fence posts made from Black Locust can last 50 to 100 years in the ground without any chemical treatment. Compare that to treated pine, which might last 15 to 20 years, or untreated pine, which rots in 3 to 5 years. This durability made it the material of choice for shipbuilding and railroad ties. The USS Constitution used Black Locust for tree nails, and those pegs are still intact over 200 years later. Yet you cannot buy Black Locust lumber at most commercial lumber yards today. It's been systematically removed from forestry programs and labeled invasive, creating a feedback loop where lack of supply reinforces the narrative that the tree isn't valuable. The scarcity of this resource underscores its untapped potential. So, what do you do if you want to plant Black Locust? First, check your local regulations. Research the specific rules in your state. In some areas, restrictions apply only to certain counties or land use types. If planting is legal, source your trees carefully. For predictable results, source named cultivars. Shipmast is a thornless variety selected for straight growth and minimal suckering. Purple Robe is an ornamental variety with purple flowers. Twisty Baby is a dwarf cultivar that doesn't sucker. If you're planting for nitrogen fixation and coppice wood, any seedling works. Plant them 8 to 10 feet apart. They establish quickly, often growing 3 to 6 feet in the first year. Water young trees during the first dry season, but once established, they require no irrigation, no fertilizer, and no pesticides. Within 3 to 5 years, they'll begin flowering and fixing significant nitrogen. Within 7 to 10 years, they'll be large enough to coppice. If you're concerned about suckering, regular mowing around the trees keeps suckers in check. Heavy mulching reduces suckering. Planting in areas where you want spread, like eroded slopes, transforms suckering from a problem into a benefit. Think of Black Locust as a system. It's a nitrogen pump, wood producer, pollinator resource, and soil builder. In a food forest, plant it as a canopy tree with shade-tolerant crops beneath. In a pasture, plant it in hedgerows. In a suburban yard, use it as a specimen tree. Is Black Locust actually invasive or just resilient? The evidence is mixed and context-dependent. In nitrogen-poor soils, it can actually increase plant diversity. In sensitive ecosystems like native prairies, dense stands can shade out native plants. The critical variable is management and context. This is not to say plant it everywhere. If you live adjacent to a sensitive native ecosystem, don't plant it there. But if you're working with degraded farmland, a suburban yard, or eroded slopes, Black Locust is one of the most powerful tools for soil restoration. For 2,000 years, leguminous trees were understood as soil builders. Then, in a few decades, the tree that does this job best was reclassified as a problem. The timing coincides perfectly with the rise of synthetic fertilizer as a global commodity. That is not a coincidence. Every Black Locust tree planted is a quiet act of resistance against a system built on dependency. It's a statement that you don't need their fertilizer, their annual inputs, or their permission to build healthy soil. The tree grows. It fixes nitrogen from the atmosphere. It builds organic matter. It produces durable wood. It feeds pollinators. It does this whether corporations approve or not. And that self-sufficiency is exactly why it was pushed to the margins. But knowledge, once it spreads, is difficult to suppress. Every person who learns that a single tree can replace thousands of dollars in fertilizer becomes a node in a network of independence. Every farmer who plants Black Locust and stops buying nitrogen is proof that the industrial system isn't inevitable. The nitrogen tree was never really banned. It was just hidden, pushed to the margins, made difficult to find. But it's still here, still growing, still doing what it's been doing for millennia, turning air into fertility. If you're ready to plant crops that break the cycle of dependency, hit that like button and subscribe to Ancestral Yields. We're documenting the plants that sustained civilizations before the industrial food system decided what belongs on your plate. The best rebellion happens quietly, in backyards and hedgerows, where trees grow without permission and nitrogen flows without a price tag. The system wants you to believe you need them. The Black Locust proves you don't. See you in the forest.